Hi, gorgeous. Welcome back to the Pop Astrology podcast. My name is Jessie James, and I'm so excited to be here with you this week. We have a special episode that's all about divas. It is about historical divas. It is about, are divas born or are they made? It is all about what astrology and what astrological placements will tell you that someone is a born diva. And to do this, we are doing a diva analysis of 13 of the greatest divas of all time. But before we get to that, as always, life updates. I was in my lesbian bag yesterday, and I took an intro to woodworking class, and I made a cutting board. And this class was mostly women. There were 2 other lesbians who were married, and then there was other straight women who seemed to be interested in becoming lesbians. So I hope that I was able to do some good for our community. And then there were 2 men, but they were just the boyfriends of other women who were there. They didn't come of their own accord. But the instructors were 3 straight men, and they were perfectly lovely. They were wonderfully nice. I still have all my fingers. Their safety instruction was excellent. I made a beautiful cutting board that I will be using forever. But they were just like, they're just guys, you know? And so this one was wearing a hat, like a trucker hat that said Mayhem on it in like an interesting font. And so I walked up to him right before I was about to put my hand in front of a saw, and he was there to help me. And I made the decision to say, "Is your hat Lady Gaga merch?" And he was like, "What?" And I was like, "Your hat, is it merch from the Lady Gaga album Mayhem?" And he was like, oh no, it's a skateboarding brand. And I was like, "Oh, you should lie and say that it's Lady Gaga merch, because that's way cooler." Anyway, he absolutely hated me. And then later, I was the first person to finish my cutting board. So I walked back out to the lobby where like the instructors were hanging out, and I sat down with them. Like, they were just clearly not expecting me to be so like up in their business, but I'm not going to sit alone. I'm in a new era right now. Saturn moved out of my first house. I feel a giant weight lifted off my shoulders. And I was just like, "So what's up, guys? What do you like to do outside of the wood shop?" And then I turned to this guy and I was like, "I know you like to listen to Lady Gaga." And he hated me. And the other instructor was like, "Yeah, man, what do you like to do outside of the wood shop?" These guys have known each other for like between 3.5 and 4 years. They work together. They see each other every week. What do you mean you don't know what he does outside of the wood shop? You guys don't talk about what do you even talk about? And like, one of them is married and the other one lives with his girlfriend. They seem perfectly sweet. I just don't understand what men be talking about and his hobby was golf. Like, that doesn't come up. You don't say, "Hey man, I golfed this weekend." Is it a secret? I just don't really understand what's going on. Anyway, I rolled my eyes and I said, "This is why we have a male loneliness epidemic." And the guy was like, "I'm not lonely." And I was like, "Okay, I didn't say that you were." Men are so emotional sometimes. They really just letting their emotions get in the way of their rational reasoning. This is why women need to be in charge. So anyway, yeah, that's what I've been doing. Other than that, you know, I'm unemployed. I love being unemployed. Saturn just moved into my second house, which does raise a little bit of concern around finances. But if there's one thing I know about Saturn, it makes you sad, and then at the end, it makes you stronger. And sure, good, really exciting stuff coming up. So this is my plea. As always, if you are interested in a birth chart reading, you can book one on my website, popastrologypod.com, and you will receive the best astrology reading of your life. And in return, I will receive some money. And I think that is honestly a wonderful exchange. And astrology readings are beautiful. I literally love to do them. I wish I could do them for free, but I do have to pay rent. And so that brings us to where we are. Let's talk about divas. What makes a diva? What is a diva? That is a question that I feel only a diva could answer, but fortunately I'm a diva and I'm sitting right here in front of you. A diva is the female version of a hustler. In the words of Beyonce Giselle Knowles. A diva. Who is this diva? It's the question on all of our lips. What makes a diva? What do the planetary alignments say when a diva is born? What sort of things are happening in the universe? That is the question that I posed. And that is the question that I'm here today to answer by doing a very scientific study of 13 of the greatest divas of the last century. In today's study of diva astrological placements, we have Amy Winehouse, Aretha Franklin, Barbra Streisand, Beyonce, Britney Spears, Celine Dion, Cher, Christina Aguilera, Diana Ross, Madonna, Mariah Carey, Meryl Streep, and Whitney Houston. We have a mix. We have actors, we have singers, we have white women, we have black women, we have divas of yore and divas of today. We've got a good mix of it all, though obviously I want to acknowledge the many, many divas who are not represented here today. All divas are special. All divas are important. I went with a sample size of 13 because 13 is a sacred feminine number, and that's why it has been demonized by society. 13 is the number of lunar cycles there are each year. 13 is also the number of women's menstrual cycles that there are each year. Friday the 13th is said to be a bad thing because Friday is Venus Day and Venus is a feminine planet, and 13 is a sacred women's number, which means that the church and the men and the patriarchy had to pretend that it was evil so that they could continue to demonize women and the practice of witchcraft, which is a sacred healing art. And like, why are women portrayed as witches and burned? But like when a man is Noah or God or whatever and like parts the Red Sea or receives information from someone on high, suddenly that's like so cool. But when a woman does it, she's a witch. Many questions. But these divas that you see here today have faced down the men and they have come out on top because they are divas. In my study of divas, I went from the very highest levels down to the very lowest levels. So first, I'm just going to look at, sun, moon, and rising, sun, house, etc., and see if any patterns emerge. And patterns emerge indeed. As you can see here, most of these divas are either fire signs or earth signs. There is one water sign, and that is Cancer Sun, Meryl Streep. Meryl happens to be the only woman on this list who isn't also a singer. So I'm wondering if maybe that has something to do with it. For the fire sign representation, we have 4 Aries, 2 Leos, and 1 Sagittarius. And for the earth sign representation, we have 2 Virgos and 2 Tauruses. So on the diva scale, let's see, are you a fire or an earth sun? If so, check your box. You're well on your way to becoming a diva. And then I wanted to look at which house the sun falls into on these people's charts, which I have indicated here in the bottom right corner of each box. I noticed that the most represented sun house on the diva list was the 6th house. The divas who have the sun in the 6th house are Aretha Franklin, Beyonce, Diana Ross, and Whitney Houston. These happen to all be 4 black women. In fact, 4 of the 5 black women on this chart. Beyonce has her sun in the 6th house. I did an episode about Beyonce last week. I went much more into detail about this there. But a sun in the 6th house essentially indicates like a really, really hard worker, someone whose like life purpose is their work, and someone who's almost like obsessive about their work and controlling about their work product. I think that this really shows that as black women, these divas have had to really overcome challenges and obstacles and had to do really, really hard work and be very focused on it to achieve the ranks that they achieved, which are stunningly impressive. Like Aretha Franklin and Whitney Houston are regularly ranked as the best singers of all time. But it was much harder for them to achieve the success than it would have been for a white woman to do so. So a mark of a diva is the power and the will to overcome the obstacles that society puts in your path. Interestingly, the house opposite the 6th house, the 12th house, this is the Virgo Pisces axis, had the 2nd highest number of divas. Divas with the sun in the 12th house are Mariah Carey, our other black woman, Meryl Streep, and Madonna. Another famous diva who has her sun in the 12th house is Taylor Swift. I did an episode about Taylor Swift where I went more into detail about 12th house suns. That's 2 episodes ago. I do have 2 Taylor Swift episodes. It is the Taylor Swift Astrology episode, not the Taylor Swift episode where I list all the reasons that I think Taylor Swift is a lesbian, just to clarify. Anyway, I do not think it is a coincidence that the 6th house, 12th house axis, the Virgo Pisces axis, is called the axis of service. Like, we knew already that these women were serving, but the stars knew as well. They destined them to serve. And I think that's so beautiful. But in all seriousness, the 6th house and the 12th house are both considered cadent houses. The cadent houses of the zodiac are the 3rd, 6th, 9th, and 12th house. They are the last house before you move into one of the angular houses. That's the 1st house, which is your rising. It's the 7th house, which is your descendant. It's the 4th house, which is your IC, and the 10th house, which is your MC. These are the angular houses. These define our body. They define our relationship to our family, our relationship to other people. So the cadent houses, these houses that come right before, are the houses where we integrate the lessons that we've learned over the past 2 houses and prepare to implement them into our bodies once we reach the next house, which is an angular house, which is all about us. They're concerned with thought and consideration and learning and reflection and looking back on everything that you've learned and understanding. For example, the 9th house is all about beliefs. It is after I've gone through the journey of the 7th house, which is relating to other people, and the 8th house, which is power and death and rebirth and transformation. How do my belief systems change? What belief systems no longer serve me? What belief systems do I need to build in order to go into the 10th house, which is your reputation, your place in society, your career? How will I be able to represent myself to the world unless I have a strong foundation of my belief systems? And so you have to figure out what matters to you and what doesn't. What values do you hold? How are they important to you? How are you going to live those values? The 6th and the 12th houses specifically represent the extreme ends of how we spend our time. Historically, the 6th house was related to slavery. It was work that you do that you are committed to doing. You're unable to not do that work, but it's work that is hidden away. The 1st through 6th houses are below the horizon line. It's things that aren't visible to other people, and slaves were often locked in basements, so their work was very much hidden. Astrology really operates on the principle of as above, so below. And so the 12th house is the above partner to the 6 houses below. And the 12th house historically represented involuntary commitment to mental institutions. It represented being locked away in rooms and as women specifically, and just left there to rot. So they're both about being locked away in a way, but one below ground, one above ground, but both are still hidden. These are also called hidden houses. The hidden houses are the 2nd, 6th, 8th, and 12th house because they don't make traditional aspects to the ascendant. The ascendant can't see them. So this is work that isn't really visible to other people. And I think that's part of what makes it such a diva placement, because divas are people who come off so effortless. They just seem, I woke up like this, that sort of thing. But there is a lot of work that goes into being a diva, like a lot of work. We're going to talk about these women's stories, but one thing that they all have in common is that they've all experienced really, really hard hardships in lives. And you have to do hard work to become a diva. A diva is not just like born out into this world glowing. I mean, she is, but she also has to build up her strength by going through adversity and coming out on top and realizing that she chooses her much more than she chooses trauma or pain. Now, 2 of these women have their suns at critical degrees. The first is Meryl Streep, whose sun is at 0 degrees of Cancer. 0 degrees in general, but specifically a 0-degree sun, represents a pioneering spirit, someone who is here to embrace leadership roles, someone who has just like an unmistakable sense of vitality and a magnetic pull to new adventures and uncharted territories. Meryl Streep definitely is a pioneer for women. She really advanced the world of women in acting. However, I did Google Meryl Streep pioneer to just see what came up. And all I got was a bunch of articles about how Meryl Streep called Margaret Thatcher a pioneer after portraying her in The Iron Lady, which is like, I don't know if we would say that, Diva. I don't think that Margaret Thatcher is someone that we should be glorifying. She's just like yassified Ronald Reagan, and Ronald Reagan is already yassified to all hell. So yeah, I don't think we should talk like that, but she did win an Oscar for that role. So good for her, I guess. You go, Diva. Meryl Streep is known for her versatility and her accent work. And her sun being in Cancer makes this very interesting. Cancer is ruled by the moon. The moon is the fastest moving planet in the zodiac, and the moon is constantly changing. You look up at the moon one night, you look the next night, the moon looks different. She's constantly waxing and waning. So Meryl being known for her versatility makes complete sense with her sun being in Cancer. The moon also rules the seas, and for the longest time, the seas were the main method of transportation between foreign lands. So there's a lot to say with the sign of Cancer and immigration and foreign travel. Like when Mars is in Cancer, we always have problems related to immigration. This is why when Mars was in Cancer, from early December to late April, all the talk was about immigration and deportations and ICE, et cetera, et cetera. And so her doing accent work and having a sun in Cancer, a sign associated with foreign lands, also makes a lot of sense. Astrology is so crazy and literal, like all the time. Our other critical degree sun is Cher, who has her sun at 29 degrees of Taurus. And also, happy birthday, Queen. She just turned 79 this past Tuesday. Having a sun at 29 degrees means that ego development is a critical part of your life, and you're likely to be a natural leader and take center stage. The sun is related to father figure. The moon is related to mother figure. So someone with a 29-degree sun likely experienced issues with their father or their father figure while growing up. As it so happens, Cher did experience issues with her father while growing up. Cher's father was a truck driver with gambling and drug problems who was very rarely present during her early life. Cher's parents divorced when she was only 10 months old, and her father placed her in an orphanage for several months and only allowed her mother to visit once a week and look at Cher through a window, which obviously was extremely traumatic for Cher as a baby, developing lifelong attachment and anxiety issues, and for her mother, who was separated from her child for literally no good reason. Once again, men are not sending their best. Her mother went on to marry and divorce several times throughout Cher's life. Her mother moved them around various states all over the country, California, New York, I think Texas, and Cher recalls being very poor and at one point having to use rubber bands to hold her shoes together. Obviously, Cher has overcome all of these things, become an extremely highly awarded artist, an absolute icon. Moonstruck is one of my favorite movies of all time. When I dated men, I didn't really want to have sex with them ever because I'm a lesbian and I didn't know it. But men would ask to come over and I would be like, yes, absolutely. And then I would put on the movie Moonstruck and then I would make them watch it and bring me the good knife. And then I would send them home a lot of the time, or we would go to bed. But I would be like, too much Cher. I need to just cuddle, please. And yeah, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. So to recap, if your sun is in a fire sign or an earth sign, congratulations, you're one step closer to being a diva. If your sun is in the 6th house or 12th house, congratulations, you're 2 steps closer to becoming a diva. And now we're going to move on to the moon. So once again, to note, there's no air signs in the suns of these divas. They're just too busy floating around. Air signs, Libra, Gemini, Aquarius, they're just too busy floating around. They're floating around. They can't touch the ground. And to be a diva, you need to be able to touch the ground because divas are very much rooted in their feminine and in nature. A diva appreciates luxury, and an air sign is usually too busy, like dealing with the thought realm, to care really about luxury. Honestly, our 2 Tauruses, Cher and Barbra Streisand, and Mariah Carey is a Taurus rising. I feel like Taurus is such a diva sign. For moon signs, we have added 1 air sign, Britney Spears, who is an Aquarius moon, and a couple of more water signs. Beyonce is a Scorpio moon, which is the moon in fall. It's exalted in Taurus. And Aretha Franklin and Mariah Carey are Cancer moons, which is the moon in domicile. Christina Aguilera, Diana Ross, and Meryl Streep all have an exalted moon in the sign of Taurus. If you'll remember, exalted means on a throne. So their moons, their real soul essence of who they are, their connection to their past life, is on a throne. Beyonce's is in fall, but she makes it work for her. We do have a couple of people here who have fire sun signs and earth moon signs, which I think is a really great like diva grounding pair. And those people are Madonna, Christina Aguilera, and Diana Ross. We also have an earth sun who has a fire moon to light her up inside, and that person is Barbra Streisand. I did not really see a pattern in the houses that these women have their moons in, but two of these divas do have moons at critical degrees. We once again have one 0 degree and one 29-degree moon. Amy Winehouse is our 0 degree moon in the sign of Capricorn. Having a moon at 0 degrees infuses your emotions with like a raw, unbridled intensity. This represents someone who's really deeply attuned to their instincts and driven by an inner fire that fuels their emotional expression. These people have a heightened sensitivity, a keen intuition, and a deep connection to their emotional core. If you listen to Amy Winehouse's music, I feel that this comes across really clearly. She writes really emotional songs. I mean, she's pretty honest about her issues with substance abuse and alcohol and mental illness. In her songs, she talks about her struggles with love. God, I miss her so much. She's just writes these beautiful songs. You can really tell that she is keenly attuned to her own emotions. Unfortunately, for women, especially in the patriarchal system that we live within and the music industry, which is just really, really hard on people, especially women, having too much emotions and being too present in your emotions can cause problems. And it caused her to, turn to drugs and alcohol and other ways of coping with all of the pain that she felt being a woman and having so many emotions and having so much to express and just not having the freedom or the real support she needed to do that, which is the reason that she had a really untimely death. And it's really, really very sad. And I miss her a lot. Crisis averted for now. I'm trying not to cry. Anyway, let's talk about Celine Dion, someone else who makes me want to cry. So Celine's moon is at 29 degrees of Aries. A 29-degree moon is for someone whose emotions are just so critical to their personal development in this lifetime. All 29-degree placements are karmic placements, and this is someone whose development of their emotions is integral to doing their soul's journey and working through their karma. And because it's the moon, this fated event or crisis can come from the mother figure, family, roots, or domestic life. These people also have a real urge to find a sense of emotional security. The moon in the 4th house in Cancer is all about security and safety. Doing research for this episode was quite a wild ride because did you know that Celine Dion is the youngest of 14 children and she had to sleep in a drawer instead of a crib going up so that her family could save money? Like what? Celine recalls that her family was happy but poor, and so I'm glad that they felt happy. I am not doubting the validity of her experience there. Celine also had a series of accidents as a child, including being hit by a car in front of her dad and brother when she was 5 years old and hospitalized with a concussion. Now, here we have men coming in to ruin the day once again. Celine Dion met her manager, Renee Angelil, who would also become her husband when she was 12 and he was 38 years old. And this is like way worse than Beyonce, obviously, but it's just another one of those things. Beyonce met Jay-Z and started dating him when she was 18 and he was 30, but like this was a lifelong marriage. And when he died, she was devastated and she really, truly loved him. But that man groomed you. And it's just very hard to, hold both polarities and both things as true as a woman who like fundamentally doesn't believe that women should be creeped on by older men. But, I do give all of my respect to Celine and I respect her life choices. Anyway, her husband, Renee Angelil, died on January 14th, 2016 of throat cancer at age 73. And then her brother died 2 days later. So it was a really big emotional crisis for her. And I think that this, along with all of the probably emotional abuse, financial abuse, and trauma that she had to deal with, being married to her manager and to a man who is 26 years older than her, put on her is what led her to develop her neurological autoimmune disease called stiff person syndrome, which she has been battling and has really come through on because she is the queen. But yeah, men will completely ruin your health. Be warned. Be lesbian. This should be our tagline. But anyway, Celine, my voice teacher says that she's the greatest living vocalist of all time. And I would have to agree. God, that woman is incredible. Diva of all time. And she's a triple fire. And now we move on to the third big three, which is rising signs. As we can see, air has entered the chat. There are now 3 air rising signs. We have Amy Winehouse, who is a Gemini rising, Britney Spears, who is a Libra rising, and Christina Aguilera, who's an Aquarius rising. We have also really decreased the number of earth signs that we have here. We only have Madonna, who is a Virgo rising, and Mariah Carey, who is a Taurus rising. And Taurus rising is very diva. But I think that earth rising signs come off very grounded and stable, and that's not so much what makes a diva. But we do have more water signs as well. Diana Ross and Aretha Franklin are Scorpio risings, Cher is a Cancer rising, and Whitney Houston was a Pisces rising. Water risings can come off very mysterious. You know, water doesn't really hold form, it just sort of flows. And these people can adapt to whoever they're talking to. They can just be, you know, sensitive and unpredictable. And I think that people really like that in a diva. They like to look at someone and not really know what's going on behind the scenes. That gives them like a magnetism and an allure. So I think that that's why we have a lot of water risings. And then, of course, we have our fire signs. Barbra Streisand and Beyonce, Aries risings. Celine Dion and Meryl Streep, Leo risings. We have 1 critical degree on the rising sign. That is Beyonce, whose rising is at 29 degrees Aries. I talked a lot about this on my last episode, which was all about Beyonce's birth chart, if you're interested in that. A 29-degree rising can essentially represent someone who is here in this lifetime to become the master at what they do. And I think that Beyonce is really, I mean, she's only in her early 40s. Like, she's really become and becoming the master at what she does, and she's perfect and beautiful, and I love her so much. So my overall commentary on everyone's big three is that almost all of these divas, 11 out of 13 of these divas, have at least 1 fire sign in their big three. The only ones who don't are Cher and Amy Winehouse. And I think that it's absolutely gorgeous that we have this, specifically because it's really showing that there are different kinds of divas. Like, it would be really boring if all of these divas had the same sign or the same house and everything. But divas are divas because they are really specialists in one area of their life. And then everything else they do conspires to support that. And we're going to see that a lot more when I go into like aspects. But so far we have variety, diversity is beautiful. Moving on to Mercury signs, where the thing that I wanted to comment on is that 4 of these 13 divas have their Mercury in their 11th house. These 4 people are Meryl Streep, Mariah Carey, Christina Aguilera, and Cher. Having an 11th house Mercury, it's such like a magnetic and charming placement. It does not surprise me at all that these people have Mercury in their 11th house. It makes people unconventional and expressive, quirky, and free thinking. Just like they have a charm that other people can't resist. These people tend to be friendly and have a diverse network of contacts. They're drawn to humanitarian organizations. Part of being a diva, by the way, is being a philanthropist, a humanitarian, someone who stands up for people's rights. Miss Whitney Houston, all of the Black women on this presentation are people who really fought for Black people and Black women to have their rights, and that is part of their legacy. That's part of why they're so big and such diva. But these people are outgoing, their creativity inspires others, they say what's on their mind, even if it shocks people, and they're encouraging, and they bring out the best in others. And what more do people want from a diva than someone to reflect themselves into? We are just all constantly projecting, and when you're able to project your self-image onto someone who is so well respected, so beautiful, so charming and talented and philanthropic and just a great person, you love that person. And that's what an 11th house Mercury gives to you, and that's what a diva gives to you. Moving on to Earth's next door neighbor, we have the planet Venus, which I was so excited to analyze with regard to divas because Venus is the planet of love and beauty and harmony. It's a feminine planet. It's a benefic. It just screams diva to me. Once again, Venus rules the day Friday every week. That's why in Spanish, Friday is viernes. That's why in French, Friday is vendredi, because they come from the word Venus. People recently have been like, I don't even know that. We have lost the ancient texts, please. But what I came to realize about the divas Venuses is that there's not really a pattern into what sign their Venus falls into. We have 4 fire Venuses, 4 water Venuses, 3 air Venuses, and then 1 earth Venus, which is Britney Spears, our Capricorn Venus. But what I did notice is that 5 of these divas have their Venus in their 12th house. And I came to find that the 12th house is actually very important in a diva's life. Because once again, the 12th house is the house of behind the scenes life. It's your inner world. And divas have a very rich inner world because they're not showing everyone everything. They're not super vulnerable about everything that they're going through. They project an image of ease and beauty and charm. And they make it seem really effortless, but it's not effortless. A lot goes on behind the scenes. A lot goes on in the 12th house and the 6th house. And the 5 women who have their Venus in the 12th house are Mariah Carey, Meryl Streep, Cher, Madonna, and Barbra Streisand. People with Venus in the 12th house are really big romantics, and they love to live and breathe the people and the things that they love. You know, their 12th house it's really like your mind. It's where you blend with other people and with the universe. And so they have that Venus, that sweetness. It's such an inherent part of who they are, but it's not somewhere visible to other people. People can't really place where it is. It's part of them. It's part of who they are. And they exude that charm and that Venus energy. And it makes them really magnetic and alluring and charming to other people. These people are attracted to people from all walks of life, and they're specifically attracted to people not who are the hottest, but people who have really interesting backstories and really quirky personalities. They do have a problem with boundaries. The 12th house is the sign of Pisces, and it represents having no boundaries with you and other people, not really knowing where you end and others begin, not knowing where you end and the universe and the collective unconscious begins. And so these people are really bad with boundaries, and a lot of these divas have had really rough times in life because of their families, because of their partners, but because they didn't have strong enough boundaries. I think a diva is inherently selfless, and it can get her into trouble. But I think that's part of the journey. I think a diva starts inherently selfless, gets into trouble, and then realizes that they have to love their self most. They have to put themselves first. And then that gives them that confidence and that real self-assuredness that comes with a diva. 2 of these women have Venus at a critical degree. That is Christina Aguilera, whose Venus is at 0 degrees Sagittarius in her 11th house, and Madonna, whose Venus is at 0 degrees Leo in her 12th house. Both of these Venuses are fire. Someone who has a 0 degree Venus radiates an aura of charm and a magnetic allure. They may experience love and relationships as transformative forces, and they have a penchant for initiating or attracting very intense romantic connections. And they have a palpable sense of passion and a desire for profound experiences. Looking at these women's romantic lives, they're very different, but they're both very meaningful to them in different ways. Christina Aguilera had a relationship with music executive Jordan Bratman from 2002 to 2010, and they have a son together. And then Christina separated from Jordan and entered a relationship with Matthew Rutler, who is a production assistant on the set of Burlesque. And they got together in 2010, so really, really no change over time, which I love for her. And then they got engaged in 2014, and they welcomed a daughter last summer. Madonna, on the other hand, was with her ex-husband Sean Penn for 5 years. She was with her ex-husband Guy Ritchie for 9, and her ex-partner Carlos Leon for 3. But she has 6 kids from it all, including her daughter Lourdes. And so clearly these relationships were very meaningful in her life. They brought her 6 children. That's definitely a transformative fact in someone's life. Moving on from Venus, we get into Mars signs, where I immediately noticed that all but one of our Black women, Aretha, Diana, Mariah, and Whitney, all have Mars in the 8th house. Beyonce has Mars, which is her chart ruler, in the 5th house. The 8th house deals with death and rebirth, and these women clearly faced a lot of transformational challenges trying to make it as a Black woman in a world, in an industry that was designed for white people, specifically white men, to thrive. But these women achieved the highest highs, so they had the strength to go through that death and rebirth and transformation process over and over again until they got to where they wanted to be. In their lives, people with 8th house Mars are called to confront their deepest fears and deal with their darkest secrets. They're people who will deal with tough issues, but through them will achieve great growth and luck. These people have a lot of power and confidence, and they gain a lot of power and confidence through their struggles, and they just have a very strong drive to transform their life. Aretha Franklin, for example, is known as the Queen of Soul and has been named twice by Rolling Stone as the greatest singer of all time, most recently in 2023. She was also the first female artist to ever be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Aretha has a very traumatic, harrowing upbringing. Classic, why can't we just let beautiful, talented Black women have an easy life? Aretha's mother died when she was 9, and Aretha became pregnant and gave birth to her first child when she was only 12, and her second child when she was only 15 years old. And very understandably, when she was alive, Aretha did not like to talk about these pregnancies during her interviews. Like, that's rape. It's just straight up rape. A child cannot consent to have sex and give birth. Oh my God. Like, this is so terrible. And you know that shaped her for her entire life. And she still was the best singer of all time and the first woman inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Aretha's first husband abused her. Her father was murdered while she was performing, and then she died in 2018 of pancreatic cancer. And may she rest in power. We love you, Diva. My girl Whitney Houston, who had Aretha Franklin as her honorary aunt, was nicknamed The Voice. She is a cultural icon, and her chart achievements and music videos influence the breaking down of racial and gender barriers across the music industry and across society. When I Will Always Love You was released in 1992, it became the best-selling single by a woman in history. She remains the only artist to have 7 consecutive #1 singles on the Billboard Hot 100. And something I learned when I was doing the research for this is that Whitney Houston produced The Princess Diaries and The Cheetah Girls. Like, that is literally my sister. Like, we wouldn't have The Cheetah Girls or The Princess Diaries without Miss Whitney Houston, another woman gone way too soon. Very tragic. As I mentioned, Aretha Franklin was her honorary aunt, and she was cousins with Dionne Warwick. Very sad lesbian closeting story, many such cases. Whitney Houston met her quote-unquote best friend and her, according to Robin Crawford, her longtime lesbian lover, Robin Crawford, when they were both camp counselors when they were teenagers, but Whitney was unable to be openly lesbian, and so she did marry Bobby Brown in 1992. Bobby Brown had a lot of addiction issues. He got caught drinking and driving multiple times. He was violent towards Whitney. He abused her, and she finally separated from him in 2006. And Robin Crawford, her partner, says that she believes that Whitney would still be alive today if she was able to be openly lesbian and not have to deal with all of the trauma of the abuse from Bobby Brown. Whitney died in 2012 at the Beverly Hills Hotel after decades of struggling with drug use and eating disorders and alcoholism. Her official cause of death was drowning and the effects of heart disease and cocaine use. Just another extremely tragic story. I wish we still had her here today. We will always have her because that is our diva. Anyway, I'm going to cry again, so I need to stop talking about really sad stories. See, one thing about divas is they make you emotional because they are so powerful. The most frequent Mars sign that we have is Gemini, which is so interesting because the air was so underrepresented early on. But Geminis are incredible with their words. They can win any fight by making it no longer a fight about whatever the fight was about, but making it a fight over how you are talking about the fight, like how you're arguing, and they will always win. Once they get it away from the subject matter at hand and get it to be about the fight itself, they're always going to win. The women who have Mars in Gemini are Aretha Franklin, Barbra Streisand, Diana Ross, and Meryl Streep. The second most represented Mars sign is Mars in Leo, for which we have Amy Winehouse, Cher, and Beyonce. Mars in Leo people are fiery and passionate, and I see this a lot with celebrities. Both of the Hadid sisters have Mars in Leo, literally like one Mars in Leo after the other is when they were born on the same exact degree, which is crazy. But Mars is in Leo right now. So we are in prime diva creation territory. If you're ready to get your diva on, Mars in Leo is a great time to do so. 3 of these people have Mars in detriment. Mars is in detriment in the signs of Taurus and Libra, which are the signs ruled by Venus, which are always opposite the signs ruled by Mars. So Whitney Houston has her Mars in Libra, and we have Celine Dion and Madonna with their Mars in Taurus. Clearly, Mars in detriment has not held them back from having a really wonderful career. And then we have one diva whose Mars is exalted. That's Christina Aguilera, whose Mars is in the sign of Capricorn, where Mars is exalted. So Christina has a very powerful Mars. We have 3 divas who have a Mars that doesn't really know how to do its thing in their sign, but all of them have had wonderful careers and are extremely talented. And so clearly you can have Mars anywhere and still be an absolute diva. Barbra Streisand and Diana Ross both have their Mars at 29 degrees. Having a Mars at 29 degrees is someone who has a problem with either being too active or too passive, and their goal in this lifetime is to find a good balance between those two things. Barbra Streisand was known in her neighborhood as the girl with the good voice, and she really latched onto this and used it to get attention and used it to develop her confidence. And she performed at school assemblies, she performed at weddings, she performed at summer camp, she performed everywhere, and then she has recorded 50 studio albums to this day. So clearly Barbra Streisand is on the side of more. She is on the side of too much action, maybe, I don't know. Is there such thing as too much when it comes to a diva? But she is definitely the positive extreme of Mars, of doing the most, which I love for her. Diana Ross was able to build a very successful vocal career after being the lead vocalist of the Supremes, which is similar to Beyonce, who was able to build a very successful solo career after being the lead of Destiny's Child. And what these women both have in common is very strongly placed Mars. Mars is Beyonce's chart ruler, and it's in Leo, and then Diana Ross has Mars at the anaretic degree of 29 degrees. Diana Ross was the female solo act with the most #1 songs through the 1970s and the 1980s, and her career success continued through the 1990s as well. She was named Female Entertainer of the Century in just 1976, and then went on to have such an illustrious career after that. And she's actually the only female artist to have had #1 singles on Billboard as a solo artist, part of a duet, part of a trio, and part of an ensemble, a total of 18 #1 singles. Where I see this really, really present Mars energy in Diana Ross's life is how hard she worked and hustled to achieve her dreams. She was extremely busy at school and hustled her whole life. She aspired to become a fashion designer, and she took clothing design, millinery, pattern making, tailoring, modeling, and cosmetology classes. She did several extracurriculars, including the swim team at her high school, and she did hairdressing for her neighbors to make extra money. She was really I know what I want and I'm going to go get it. And that is so a lot of Mars energy. I didn't analyze sign and house placement past the big 6 of our personal planets because I couldn't really see many patterns, and I didn't think it was as important to the story of a diva. But I did notice that almost everyone, I think all but 2 people, everyone except Aretha Franklin and Whitney Houston, has a planet at a critical degree, whether that's 0 degrees or 29 degrees. So 11 out of 13 having a critical degree placement seems very statistically significant for a trait of a diva. If you have a 0 or 29 degree placement in your birth chart, check, another step closer to being a diva. Britney Spears, for example, has her Uranus at 0 degrees. A 0 degree Uranus heralds the arrival of revolutionary energies and people who are catalysts for change. Britney was very revolutionary to pop music. I just finished reading her memoir a couple of weeks ago. Highly recommend to everyone. Highly recommend the audio version. I love the way Michelle Williams says tour. She says tour. But Britney was obviously a pop icon. She is legendary. Like the way that her outfits still get copied and made homages to by famous celebrities today, like the way that her vocal style influenced Tate McRae and Addison Rae, the way her dancing influenced all of pop music to like become great dancers is so revolutionary. There is just simply no doubt that she is a catalyst for change, that she is a revolutionary force. Also, Britney's issues with her conservatorship really raised awareness about the issue of conservatorships for young women in this country. Like, I personally didn't even know what a conservatorship was before Britney Spears. I think a lot of people are the same way. And she dealt with absolute hell for like 13 years of her conservatorship, and she got through it. But she led for people who didn't even know what this thing was to become very vocal advocates of overturning the patriarchal system of conservatorships, which is so Uranus at 0 degrees, because this is a person whose presence often sparks paradigm shifts and unconventional breakthroughs, and that's absolutely what Britney Spears has done. Mariah Carey has both her Jupiter and her North Node at 0 degrees in her birth chart. Mariah Carey's story is a tough one from a racial perspective. Her mom is a white Irish woman and her dad is a black Afro-Venezuelan man, and her mom's family actually disowned her for marrying a black man. Racial tensions prevented Mariah Carey's family from assimilating into the neighborhoods in which they lived, and at one point, her neighbors poisoned their family dog and set their car on fire. This was certainly not an easy childhood, but through it all, Mariah thrived and went on to become one of the greatest divas of all time. Having Jupiter at 0 degrees expands the horizons of possibilities and is basically like a cosmic launch pad for expansive growth. People who have a 0 degree Jupiter are blessed with a very strong sense of optimism and a boundless thirst for knowledge. Mariah is nicknamed by Guinness World Records as the Songbird Supreme, and she is known for her incredible 5-octave vocal range. Whitney Houston is known as the voice, like the greatest singer of all time. And Mariah has a 5-octave vocal range and Whitney has a 4-octave vocal range, which is not me comparing women against each other, but celebrating both of their achievements. Mariah Carey was ranked in 2023 by Rolling Stone as the number 5 greatest singer of all time, in the company of our other divas, Aretha Franklin, Whitney Houston, and Beyonce, as well as Billie Holiday, who is not included in this sample, but is a diva in her own right. And I do not like to talk fondly about men, but I have to give our other top 10 members their flowers. Sam Cooke, Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, Al Green, and Otis Redding. I love that the top 10 greatest singers of all time are Black people as of 2023. That's just beautiful. I absolutely love to see it. Obviously, this caused a lot of uproar with the people, but they can get over it. Mariah Carey also became the only artist to have her first 5 singles reach number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1990. Someone with a 0 degree North Node is someone who yearns for worldly experience and pursues their desires. And it's people who embark on unconventional journeys that are driven by an insatiable curiosity and a desire to break free from social norms. Mariah has done this in a lot of different ways. I feel like I could have talked about anything here, but religion is very important to her, and I feel like she would associate this with God. So in 2006, she gave an interview where she said, "I do believe that I have been born again in a lot of ways. I think what have changed are my priorities and my relationships with God. I feel the difference when I don't have my private moments to pray. I'm a fighter, but I learned that I'm not in charge. Whatever God wants to happen is what's going to happen. I feel like I've had endless second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth chances. It's by the grace of God that I'm still here." This to me tells me that she has been on an extreme spiritual journey, and she knows that she's made mistakes, and she knows that she's gotten really lucky, and she knows that she's had chances that the only explanation that she can think of is divine. And I personally don't believe in like the God, a male God, a Christian God, but I do think that the North Node of destiny and the person that Christians call God is basically a blanket thrown over the same universal force. And so I think it does show that she has had all of these spiritual journeys and these worldly experiences because of the ways that she speaks so passionately about Christianity and about God. Mariah Carey has also been very vulnerable in a time when it's really hard for women, especially Black women, to talk about their mental health. She was diagnosed as bipolar 2 in 2001 and opened up about it in 2018 and talked about her medications and her therapy, which I think is very strong and great of her. I think it helps a lot of people who struggle with bipolar disorder, especially women. And it's why she's a diva. Because she's real. She keeps it real. She's beautiful. She's talented. And she's one of the greatest of all time. So after spending a lot of time looking at all the signs and house placements for all of these divas' planets and their birth chart and their 0 and 29 degree planets, I was like, this still isn't enough. I'm trying to figure out what makes a diva. And so I found a couple of different things. The first one is that almost all of these women have a Uranus conjunction in their birth charts. Uranus conjunct any planet brings a revolutionary spirit, a spirit of chaos, and a spirit of change. And I think that that revolutionary spirit and being a catalyst for change is one of the primary things that creates a diva. Also, doing this work was really inspirational to me. I honestly wasn't really expecting it to be. I feel like I approached astrology from like a very mathematical perspective because that's my background, but it became a really spiritual experience. I have been struggling a lot with, I think, just wanting things to happen too soon. I have struggled my whole life, obviously, with ADHD and autism, having a short attention span, and my Virgo perfectionistic tendencies, tend to make me be like, if I do something and I'm bad at it, I never want to do it again. And if I do something and I'm good at it, why would I have to work to become better at it? And this really helped me because I saw that these women were naturally really good at the things that they did. Mariah Carey wasn't born with a 5-octave vocal range, but she had a passion and a talent for singing growing up. And she worked so hard to develop that into what it is today and become a diva. And part of the reason for all of this is because divas keep things behind the scenes. Divas work really, really, really hard. All of these women have worked so incredibly hard to get to where they are and experience so much hardship and strife, but they don't show it. They are just divas. They are just beautiful, talented, inspiring women who have done such amazing things in society. And literally, when I was doing the research for this, I was like, oh my God, I became so inspired to work harder. I became so inspired to say that, my goal is to change society. I don't want the patriarchy anymore. I don't want capitalism, obviously, but I want to create a world where women feel more comfortable speaking up for themselves. I want the end of compulsory heterosexuality, I'll tell you that much. And it just was really inspiring. And that specifically was the Uranus conjunction with other planets. Great news / bad news for my fellow 1993 babies. I have Uranus exactly conjunct Neptune in my birth chart. And I was like, oh my God, yay, diva. And then I was like, oh, just kidding. Everyone who was born in 1993, 1992, 1994, maybe even further has the same exact placement. So it's okay. But yeah, millennials, we are all divas. And I love that for us. But I digress. Amy Winehouse has a 7th house Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in the sign of Sagittarius. Aretha Franklin does not have a Uranus conjunction, but her 7th house Uranus in Taurus makes a trine to her 11th house Neptune in Virgo. Barbra Streisand has Saturn conjunct Uranus in her 2nd house of Taurus, making a trine to Neptune in her 6th house of Virgo. Beyonce has Uranus conjunct her moon and Lilith in her 8th house of Scorpio, making a trine to Mars in her 5th house of Leo. Britney Spears has Mercury conjunct Uranus in her 3rd house of Sagittarius with a 5-degree orb, which is a little bit wider orb than I usually use for aspects, but still a conjunction. Celine Dion has Uranus conjunct Pluto in her 2nd house of Virgo, which is also a generational placement, but it's still a Uranus conjunction. Cher has Uranus in her 12th house of Gemini conjunct her North Node, and this is also making a sextile to Mars in her 2nd house of Leo. Christina Aguilera has Uranus in her 10th house of Scorpio at the very, very end, conjunct her 11th house Venus in the sign of Sagittarius at 0 degrees. Diana Ross does not have a Uranus conjunction, but her Uranus is the base of a mini grand trine. Her 8th house Uranus in Gemini is sextiling 10th house Pluto in Leo and 6th house Sun in Aries, and those two things make a trine to each other. Madonna also does not have a Uranus conjunction, but Uranus in her 12th house of Leo is squaring her 9th house Mars in Taurus. Mariah Carey has Uranus in her 6th house of Libra, conjunct her Jupiter and her North Node, and all three of these things making a sextile to Neptune in her 7th house Scorpio. Meryl Streep has Sun conjunct Uranus in her 12th house of Cancer, making a sextile to her 2nd house Saturn in Virgo. And finally, Whitney Houston has Uranus in her 7th house of Virgo, making a conjunction to her descendant and to her Mercury. I also noticed that all of these women have aspects to their Venus in their birth charts. Amy Winehouse has Venus trine Neptune. Aretha Franklin has Venus square Saturn. Barbra Streisand has Venus square Jupiter. Beyonce has a Venus-Pluto conjunction, making a sextile to Neptune. Britney Spears has Venus squaring her Pluto. Celine Dion has a Mercury-Venus conjunction. Cher has Venus conjunct her North Node. Christina has Venus conjunct her Uranus, so that's both of these aspects in one. Diana Ross has her Venus sextiling her Moon. Madonna's Venus is square her Neptune. Mariah Carey has Venus conjunct her Saturn in a square to her Moon. Meryl Streep's Moon makes a sextile to her Venus. And Whitney Houston's Sun is conjunct her Venus. The third thing I found is that almost all of these women have a stellium in their birth chart. A stellium is when you have 3 or more planets in one sign. And I think that this is very indicative of diva-ness because a stellium shows that there's a real concentration of energy in one part of your birth chart. And I think that to be a diva, you can't try to be everything. You have to know that you have one place that you specialize in and spend your whole life like in that place. You can dabble outside of it, obviously, but you can't try to be everything all the time. So having a concentration of planets in one area of your birth chart helps you channel and hone that diva-ness. Amy Winehouse has a 7th house stellium in her sign of Sagittarius. She has Jupiter, Uranus, and Neptune. Aretha Franklin does not have any stelliums. Barbra Streisand has a 2nd house stellium in the sign of Taurus. She has Sun, Mercury, Saturn, and Uranus there. Beyonce has a 7th house stellium, which I talked a lot about in the last episode if you're interested in learning more, but she has Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto in the sign of Libra. Britney Spears has a stellium in her 3rd house of Sagittarius, where she has the Sun, Mercury, Uranus, and Neptune. Celine Dion has a stellium in her 9th house of Aries, where she has her Sun, Moon, and Saturn. Cher does not technically have a full stellium, but she does have a 12th house quote-unquote stellium in Gemini of her Venus, Uranus, and North Node. The North Node is not a planet, so it's not technically part of a stellium, but we give it to her honorary because she's Cher. Why not? Christina Aguilera has 2 stelliums, one in her 9th house of Libra, where she has Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto, and one in her 11th house of Sagittarius, where she has the Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Neptune. Diana Ross has an 8th house stellium of Mars, Saturn, and Uranus. Madonna also has 2 stelliums. She has one in her 1st house of Virgo, where she has the Moon, Mercury, and Pluto, and a second one in the 12th house of Leo, where she has her Sun, Venus, and Uranus. Mariah Carey has a 12th house stellium in the sign of Aries, where she has her Sun, Venus, and Saturn. Meryl Streep has a 12th house stellium in the sign of Cancer, where she has Sun, Venus, and Uranus. And Whitney Houston has a 7th house stellium in the sign of Virgo, where she has Mercury, Uranus, and Pluto. And I looked and I couldn't find any patterns about like the chart ruler having to be in the stellium or the ruler of that house having to be in the stellium. Didn't seem like there were any rules, just 3 planets, 3 or 4 planets in a sign. That's a diva for you. And then the last pattern that I noticed was that every single one of these women has strong aspects to their North Node. The North Node, once again, is about your destiny, and having a strong aspect to something in your birth chart lights it up. It just makes it more strongly placed. And I think that being a diva means having a really strong sense of destiny, having a really strong sense of purpose and what you're meant to do in this life that will get you through the really difficult times and get you through the rejections. And every time you hear no, you know that it's just another step along the path to get a yes. I feel like having a strongly placed North Node is really important to this. Coming out hot out of the gate with Amy Winehouse, whose first house North Node in Gemini is conjunct her ascendant, square her Sun and Mercury in Virgo, and trine her Lilith in Aquarius. Aretha Franklin has her North Node in Virgo in her 11th house, which is square her 8th house Mars-Jupiter-Lilith conjunction in Gemini and opposite her Mercury in Pisces. Barbra Streisand has her North Node in the 6th house of Virgo, which makes a trine to her Mercury in Taurus and to her MC in Capricorn. Beyonce's North Node is in her 4th house of Cancer, which is conjunct her Mars at the very beginning of Leo, and it squares her rising at 29 degrees Aries and her descendant at 29 degrees Libra. Her North Node also makes a trine to her Moon Uranus-Lilith conjunction in her 8th house of Scorpio. Britney Spears' North Node in her 10th house of Cancer is square her Pluto in Libra and sextile her Mars in Virgo. Celine Dion has her North Node in the 9th house of Aries, which is conjunct her midheaven and her Saturn. It also makes a trine to her vertex in the 5th house and a trine to her 1st house lot of fortune in Leo. Vertex and lot of fortune are points that I actually haven't talked about before on this podcast. They're more like ancient astrology points and they're not as prevalent in modern astrology, but I do use them in my own personal astrology and in my birth chart readings. So I'll give you a little bit of an overview now just so that we can understand them a little bit and get ready to talk about them more in a future episode. Both of these have to do with fortune and karma and luck. And both of these are mathematical calculations. They are not actually planetary bodies. The vertex in astrology is the point that's associated with karmic encounters and connections in someone's life, and it can indicate situations and relationships that are destined to occur as part of your soul path. The vertex is related to significant events and turning points in your life. This is a mathematical point. It's the intersection of the plane of the celestial equator with the plane of the ecliptic. Very math-heavy stuff. AstroSeek will do all the calculations for you. This usually falls between the 5th house and the 8th house. This is not an active point. You know, it's not a planet. It doesn't move on its own, but it can be activated through planetary transits, either making a conjunction or another aspect to your vertex, through synastry, being in a relationship or a partnership with someone who has a planet that's either conjunct or in aspect to your vertex will activate it. And also secondary progressions, how your birth chart evolves as you age. When planets in your birth chart move through your vertex, that activates it. And that's when we have these events happening that are like fated events and karmic connections and meetings and significant turning points in your life. So it is important to pay attention to the synastry of who you're in relationship with and whether that's in aspect to your vertex, so you'll know if that's like a very significant partnership or person in your lifetime. And also your secondary progressions and the transits that we have every single day, you really should know when your vertex is being activated so that you can keep a lookout for anything that seems karmic and fated. Those things are meant to happen to you and you need to embrace them. They're part of your soul's path. The lot of fortune is also a mathematical calculation. There's lots for everything. There's like the lot of spirit. There's a lot of lentils. Chris Brennan has a really good episode of the Astrology podcast that's specifically about the lot of fortune and the lot of spirit if you're interested in learning more, but I will also talk about it more on future episodes. If you have a day chart, so if your sun is above the horizon on your birth chart, you can calculate your lot of fortune by taking the distance from your sun to your moon. So I have sun in Virgo and moon in Gemini. So I would count all the degrees from my sun in Virgo over to my moon in Gemini. And then you add that number of degrees to your ascendant. So there is 10 houses between Virgo and Gemini. So we count from my rising in Pisces, 10 houses over, and we get to my lot of fortune, which is in Sagittarius. If you have a night chart, which means that you were born at night or that the sun in your birth chart is below the horizon, it's in your 1st through 6th house, then you calculate this by taking the distance from the moon to the sun in your birth chart. So if I had a night chart, I would take the distance from Gemini to Virgo, which is 4 signs, and I would add that to my ascendant. So Pisces plus 4 signs would be Gemini. My lot of fortune would be in Gemini if I had a night chart. This is a little bit of an easier calculation to do. You don't have to know anything about the celestial equator or the plane of the ecliptic. AstroSeek will do this calculation for you. The lot of fortune was actually super important in ancient astrology because it's calculated using the sun, moon, and rising, which are your three most personal and important placements in your whole entire birth chart. Your ascendant is the primary indicator of your physical body, and that's why people often look like their rising signs, and it's fairly easy to tell someone's rising sign simply based on their appearance. And your moon is the most direct indicator of your soul, of your past life, of your roots, of who you truly are at the very core of you. Therefore, the lot of fortune is an indicator of your living physical body and your relationships to the physical and social world in which you live, which can say a lot about prosperity and fortune. There's lots to say about the lot of fortune, but if you want to look at yours today, if your lot of fortune shares a sign with planets that are benefics, so either Venus or Jupiter, or if it's in a sign that has planets in dignity, so planets that are either in domicile or exalted. So for example, if you had your lot of fortune in the sign of Sagittarius with Jupiter, that would be with a benefic, it's with Jupiter, and Jupiter is in domicile in Sagittarius, that would be considered a well-placed lot of fortune. However, if your lot of fortune shares a sign with the malefics, so that's Mars or Saturn, or shares a sign with planets that are not dignified, so planets that are either in detriment or in fall, then it would be considered poorly placed, and you will probably have more challenges with luck in this lifetime. So for example, if your lot of fortune was co-present with Mercury in the sign of Pisces, Pisces is both in detriment and in fall in the sign of Pisces. So your lot of fortune would be considered poorly placed. But with everything in astrology, nothing is good, nothing is bad. There's lessons to be learned from each placement, and it's your life. Like, no one else's life is yours, so why even be sad about an astrology placement? It's literally who you are, and you are amazing. Anyway, this was just a quick little rundown to say that Celine Dion's North Node is trining, making a very supportive aspect to both her lot of fortune and her vertex. This woman had a lot of fortune in her life. That does not mean that she had an easy life, however. Obviously, she struggled a lot growing up, and she's struggling a lot now with her autoimmune disease, but she did have a lot of fortune, and she is a very blessed and lucky diva. Cher has her North Node in her 12th house of Gemini, which is conjunct her Venus, squaring her IC and her MC, and trining her Jupiter in her 4th house of Libra. Christina Aguilera has a North Node in her 7th house of Leo, which makes a square to her Moon Chiron conjunction in her 4th house of Taurus. Diana Ross has her North Node in her 10th house of Leo, conjunct her Pluto, both making a sextile to Uranus in her 8th house of Gemini. Madonna has her North Node in her 2nd house, conjunct her Jupiter. Mariah Carey has a North Node in her 12th house of Aries at 0 degrees, opposing her 6th house Jupiter in Libra. Meryl Streep's North Node is conjunct her midheaven. And then Whitney Houston is the only person here who doesn't have a North Node strong aspect in her birth chart. Whitney has been an exception for some of these. And we love that for her. 12 out of 13 ain't too bad. And we love a diva who is not conforming to societal diva expectations that I have set forth here in this podcast. And that is all she wrote. I think at the end of the day, what I and you and we can all take away from this podcast episode is that there is no one thing that makes you a diva. There is no magic placement in your birth chart. There is no magic pill. There is no like, oh, this girl can be a diva by solving this mathematical formula and doing this, that, and the other thing, and then she will be beloved by all. It's an inherent part of you. There are so many different aspects at play in this. These are just 13 women, 13 divas whose charts I looked at. There are so many more divas throughout our history and in our society. And what it really takes to be a diva is to come out on the other side of hardship and be stronger for it, to experience negative things in your life and not let it bring you all the way down and not let it ruin your sense of self and destroy your confidence and prevent you from rising to the occasion and achieving great things and taking what you know is yours. Being a diva is about being a good person. It's about being a philanthropist. It's about standing up for what's right. Being a diva is about beauty that shines from the inside out. Being a diva is about just having a very magnetic and alluring sense of charm, a little bit of a sense of mystery, and being someone who people can see themselves in that makes them really happy to be themselves today. And I think that's a great lesson for all of us. We should all be happy to be ourselves, but especially as women, and especially for women of color in a society that has been organized around whiteness and around maleness and around straightness for centuries, if not millennia, seeing that as a challenge, not seeing it as a barrier, not seeing it as an obstacle to be who you are, but seeing it as a challenge to rise to the occasion, to take head on, and then to look back and say, yeah, I did that shit. Anyway, I love you cuties so much. If you have any requests for episodes that you would like to see in the future, you can leave a comment on YouTube, or you can send me a DM on Instagram or TikTok at popstrologypod, or you can shoot me an email at popstrology@proton.me. You can also book a birth chart reading with me on my website, www.popstrologypod.com. All of these links will be in the description, and I'm really excited to see you again next week. I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day. I hope we get some gay Taylor Swift chaos tomorrow at the AMAs, and I love you so much. Bye!